unscheduled interruption due to capacity management. What does that really mean? You know what unscheduled interruption is. If you don't know, you should know by now. Capacity management, though, is a strange word. It's a new word. Let me venture to explain it. You as the consumer, the customer, you consume electricity. Electricity must be supplied to your home for use on your appliances. That electricity that you consume is termed demand, because you are demanding that power, and Domlec must give you that power. So that's the demand. It can be used interchangeably with load. So load, demand is the same thing. You are the consumer, Domlec is the supplier. So a demand is made on the supplier, or we can say on the supply. When a demand is made on the supply, the supplier must be able to give, to sell, to produce. In Domlec's case, Domlec must generate electricity so you can get it. So Domlec then has what is called generating capacity, because for you to give anything, you must have the capacity to give it. And Domlec capacity is really a generating capacity, because they generate electricity. So they must, in other words, if you demand 17 megawatt like the manager said, Domlec must have the capacity within their generators to produce / generate 17 megawatt of power combined. When the demand exceeds the ability to supply, you have a problem. And that's exactly the fiasco that Domlec has found itself in. Domlec is unable to meet the demand of the consumers. Now, capacity, let's talk a little bit about capacity. Capacity is simply your ability to have or to produce it. Domlec has generators to generate. Let's use some fictitious numbers. Let's say Domlec has 20 generators, each of them rated at 1 megawatt. 1 megawatt is 1,000,000 watts, by the way. That means Domlec has capacity of 20 megawatts. 20 generators, each rated at 1 megawatt. Domlec has a capacity of 20 megawatts. And you might say they should be able to generate 20 megawatts. No, that's not the case. 20 megawatts in Domlec language is called 20 megawatt of installed capacity. Installed capacity is different from available capacity. Let me break that down further. If you have a generator that should generate 1 megawatt of power and it's old, chances are it has been derated. It no longer can do a million megawatts. So it might be derated to 800,000. So it's below it's below the capacity that it was sold at, because it's old, it's not able, probably leaking oil and so on. If that generator is taken off for maintenance, so it has broken down, that's a generator you don't have. So instead now you have 20 megawatt of power. You have available to you 90. Let's put it that way. Domlec also runs a hydro system, and the hydro system produces power based on the availability of water. So if Domlec has installed capacity at the hydro of 5 megawatt of power, but the lake is below half the level as it is now, you'll probably be able to harness maybe about half of that to add to the system. Therefore, you cannot calculate the installed capacity as the available capacity. Available capacity is pretty much what you have available to you to use. So again, if Domlec is demanding 17 megawatt of power, but the available capacity that they have at the moment, based on generators that are broken down, generators that are derated, the inability of the hydro to give them too much help because of the low water, Domlec now is basically saying that you are demanding 17.1 megawatt of power, but maybe I'm only able to give 14 or 15 megawatt based on the available capacity. So that's where capacity management comes into play now, because you have X amount of capacity, you have a greater demand, so the only way you can really rectify that problem or deal with it is to reduce the demand. So Domlec really calling it capacity management. Maybe they correct in their own way, but I personally think that it's not capacity management, but it's rather load management or demand management, because they're really not into altering the capacity. The capacity they have is what they have. They haven't bought any new generators, they haven't added any geothermal, so that's just the capacity they have. They can't do better, but what they can do is to reduce the load that is demanded of the system through a process called load shedding. So really, they're saying capacity management. Before they used to say load shedding. It's the same thing. They really load shedding. And how do they do that? Well, very simple. The productive part of the economy, or the economic drivers of the country, so to speak, like the town, places that manufacture, Canefield Industrial Estate, where you have Clay Harbour, who is the biggest employer. You want to ensure that this area remain energized, because they need the energy to produce, and they are big producers. You cannot tamper with the hospital, the airport, certain big hotels, because depriving them of energy will have more dire consequences than if you say interrupt agricultural village. Yeah, we appreciate the breadfruit and the plantain, but the fact is you don't need energy to produce these things. The energy is more for convenience and entertainment to these people, and therefore they will be removed of the system in terms of, in case of load shedding. The one problem we have with areas like this, especially on the East Coast, where you have a larger agricultural based communities, they don't consume a lot. So you may take off the entire East and realize it's just a drop in the bucket. Then you go targeting places that similar, they have electricity for personal use, more or less, but they are larger consumers. Places like Canefield, Massac, St. Joe, Salisbury, they are bigger communities. They consume more power, and therefore if you remove them from the network, you will then be able to fall within your ability to supply whatever demand that you've reduced it to with the limited capacity that you have. So that's in a nutshell what capacity management really is.